All right, let's get right into it. Over the last decade and a half, Egypt has gone through one of the most radical transformations you can imagine. Seriously, what's been built in this short time might just be more than what was done in decades before. We're talking whole new cities rising out of the sand, a complete overhaul of the country's economy, its military. So the big question is, how did a country that was staring into the abyss manage to turn it all around? To really get your head around this, just think about these two snapshots in time. Back in 2013, the feeling in the air was fear, just total uncertainty about where things were headed. Now, fast forward to today, and the entire country feels like one giant construction site. A whole new reality is literally being built from the ground up. And that massive gap, from near collapse to this incredible construction boom, that's what we're going to unpack.
So, how on earth did they do it? How does a nation on the very brink manage to flip the script so dramatically? How did this huge existential challenge become an opportunity for reconstruction on a scale we've almost never seen before? Let's break it down.
Okay, before we jump into all the shiny new buildings and mega projects, we have to go back in time. Because to really appreciate what was achieved, you first have to understand just how deep the crisis was back in 2013. Let's start with tourism. You see, tourism wasn't just another part of the economy. It was an absolute lifeline, making up more than 12% of the whole thing. By 2013, that engine just completely shut down. It was basically wiped out, which meant a huge slice of the national income just vanished. And that led to total economic paralysis. And this is where you see the crisis really start to snowball, you know? It just kept rolling downhill, getting bigger and triggering one disaster after another. You had constant power cuts, which didn't just mean the lights went out at home. It meant factories were shutting down. The wheels of production were just grinding to a halt. And of course, that led to the currency devaluing, foreign investors running for the hills, and unemployment just skyrocketing. And as if all of that economic chaos wasn't enough, there was a major security threat brewing. Terrorism was on the rise in the Sinai Peninsula, and the feeling at the time was that the country was just heading down a one-way street with no way back. Okay, so out of all that chaos, a plan had to emerge, a rescue plan, and it was built on 4 fundamental pillars, with each one designed to prop up the others and build a completely new foundation for the nation. So what were these 4 pillars? Well, first up was the backbone, a brand new national road network to connect the whole country. Second was the future, a super ambitious plan to build new cities from scratch. Third, creating the gateway to the world by modernizing ports and trade routes. And fourth, and this one was absolutely critical, was the shield, a completely rebuilt military and security force to protect all these new assets. So let's dig in and see how this plan actually started to take shape, starting with those first 2 pillars. This was all about laying the physical groundwork, the arteries and the future, for a totally new Egypt. The absolute starting point was the country's arteries, a new road network stretching over a whopping 7,000 kilometers, cutting right through the desert to link every part of the nation. And these weren't just roads, they were the backbone for everything that came next. Without them, there'd be no new cities, no industrial zones, nothing. So you might be asking, why the massive focus on new cities? Well, it really just came down to simple math. With the population growing by more than 2 million people every single year, the old cities just couldn't take the strain anymore. Building new urban centers wasn't a luxury, it was a flat-out necessity. And this kicked off what was basically a race against time. You saw the rise of the new administrative capital, New Alamein on the coast, Galala City, and many more. We're talking over 25 new cities in total. The goal was crystal clear: take the pressure off the old cities and create new spaces for millions to live and work. Now, you can't just build all this incredible new stuff in a vacuum. It needed to be connected to the rest of the world, and, even more importantly, it needed to be protected. And that brings us to the next 2 pillars, securing the gateway and the shield. Take the Suez Canal, for example. When it was expanded back in 2015, a lot of people thought it was just about getting ships through faster, but the real vision was so much bigger than that. That was just step 1 in turning the entire area from a simple shipping lane into a massive global economic and logistics hub. The goal was to make Egypt a central player in global trade all over again. And of course, all of these new projects and assets needed that shield. I mean, securing the Sinai was job number 1 for any development to happen. But it went way beyond that. With over 2,000 kilometers of coastline to protect and huge new gas fields being discovered offshore, a modern military wasn't a luxury item.
It was essential for securing the country's economic future. And this wasn't just about buying a few new pieces of equipment. We're talking about a complete strategic shift, acquiring entirely new capabilities. Things like advanced naval ships like Mistral-class carriers and modern submarines, plus an air force that could carry out long-range precision strikes. This was all designed to build a powerful deterrent to protect the nation's interests.
So this all sounds incredibly impressive, right? But let's be real. Every major transformation like this comes with a price tag. And to get the whole story, we have to talk about the very real challenges that people faced during this time.
This quote really says it all. The economic reforms that had to happen alongside all this construction were tough, really tough. And the financial pressure was felt in households all across Egypt. That's a reality you just can't ignore when you look at the big picture.
So you end up with this really difficult equation. On one side of the scale, you've got the price, high inflation, rising prices, more national debt. But on the other side, you have the strategic gains, stabilizing the country's foreign currency reserves, finally solving those chronic power cuts to the point where there's now a surplus to export, and achieving energy independence with massive new gas discoveries.
So after all of this, what's the main thing to take away from this incredible decade of work? It really boils down to two words: speed and scale. What got done in just 10 years would, under any normal circumstances, have taken at least 30.
And you have to understand, this was never about just a bunch of scattered projects here and there. The ultimate goal was to build a single, solid foundation, a really strong infrastructure that could support the country's economic growth for decades to come.
But the story is far from over. In fact, you could say this was all just the first chapter in a much bigger story that's still being written. And after all this foundational work, the most important question is now on the table. The foundation is built. So what is the shape of the future that's going to be built on top of it?